which is to welcome now David White to make a presentation about the soil food web. And I think,
hello,
there you are. Hey, David, thanks for joining us. And I can't wait to see what you have to share here. David is director of the Ojai Center for Regenerative Agriculture, and just doing things all over our watershed, and I guess other watersheds I don't pay so much attention to. But well, he's gonna make it really clear, more clear than anybody out this morning, what's happening with the soil food web.
All right. Okay, thanks Jan and Ron for putting this together, and I'm honored to be on the panel along with experts who are willing to share their experience and expertise and their research. I think that what I'm going to share is maybe a bit more of an edge thing, because regenerative agriculture, when we started the Center for Regenerative Agriculture in 2002, it was very much a new term, and now it's become much more well used. But really the Center for Regenerative Agriculture and Executive Director of it promotes the techniques of regenerative agriculture, and the bottom line of that is increasing soil carbon content. Hey, Ron, can you mute your microphone, please, because I can hear you doing the dishes in the back. So yeah, we're looking at ways to increase soil carbon content, and really that's become nature-based climate solutions. And so presenting and supporting composting and tree planting would be key things that CRA does. I'm going to try the share screen thing here and see if I can get this to work. Let's see. I'm going to share this PowerPoint. Oh, the slideshow. All right. Can you guys see that? Can you just see CRA on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So Center for Regenerative Agriculture. Anyway, they say that, what is it? The joke is, you should start with a joke. So people say I'm an egomaniac, but enough about them. I was born and raised in Scotland, and we all dress like this over there. Actually, Kenneth McKellar went to the University of Aberdeen, my hometown, and he studied forestry, so it's kind of interesting. That my background, my dad's family were farmers. You know, the classic thing they grow in Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen Angus, and grass-fed cattle. Maybe it would be more appropriate to say they were rain-fed cattle. But the background, my family farmed with Clydesdales in the 30s and 40s. We didn't have any citrus, only at Christmas. It was a real treat. I went to Edinburgh for university. I studied biology. I have a Ph.D. in cell biology. In Scotland, everybody lives in castles. That's my one on the left. I went and did research at Cornell in OBGYN. So my specialty is cell biology. I've done a lot of microscopy of different types. And I was studying in vitro fertilization at that time. But I came to Ojai. It was the first place I visited in America in 1985. And, you know, I got into the environment here, and I now do a bunch of education. I educate about soil food web. Here I am working with high schoolers, and I use this to promote, you know, not just environmental education and connecting kids to nature, but I also do watershed education too. Here's our CRA Sports Community Soil testing workshops, where people can bring samples of their soils and compost and learn about soil food web. Here's my buddy Bill doing some microscopy with folks who brought their own soils. So what I guess is is most important for me here is to emphasize the importance of carbon capture and planting teas. Thanks, Kathy, for having this at one of our recent events. Remember when we used to get together and do things like this? This is the only text slide I think I'm going to put up today, but these are principles of regenerative agriculture, and you can read those yourself. But the interesting thing is to look at, well, how does citrus and growing citrus match into those? And yeah, well, we got living plants 365 days of the year, and they're evergreen. So they are continually putting carbon into the soil. And there tends not to be tillage in citrus. So we're doing good there. I think the question about diversity above and below ground has to be brought into question, especially when folks are industrial ag using Roundup and Agrimec to treat for ACP, and so we're losing diversity, and we're growing a monocrop in many cases. They aim for healthy soil, I'll talk a little bit about, and moving away from using chemicals, especially salts and toxins. And yeah, enhancing microbes and mycorrhizal networks, we'll talk about that, and a bit about integration of animals. So let's see if this runs, I'm not sure, oh look. So yeah, trees are good. They put carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil and feed the soil food web. And it's pretty amazing that all plants do this. So the term weeds, I think, is pejorative, and really we should be thinking that plants are our allies. And when you see what's happening at the rhizosphere, here it is. This is liquid sun. And thanks to Gabe Brown for loaning me this slide. And Gabe's YouTube videos are great for getting you excited about regenerative ag.
I need to move this a little bit.
I'm moving it. Okay, so I want to recommend Michael Phillips' book, The Holistic Orchard. In particular, he makes it clear that not all wood chips are the same, that mulches, and particularly ramial wood chips, which are from branches that are under 2.5 inches in diameter, they have much more lignins. They're soluble and can be broken down by fungi. And so if you're getting polymerized lignins, that is wood, then that's going to use your nitrogen up. Whereas if you're getting the smaller branches from woody shrubs, the tips, those are bringing much more biological vibrancy into your mulches. So it's good to remember about that, and I highly recommend that book. He also wrote this book, and we're going to talk a little bit about mycorrhizae coming up. So yeah, mycorrhizal association. Fungi are so important. And we're learning about these all the time. And this slide shows a classic picture of mycorrhizal association with a gymnosperm. There are mycorrhizal associations with angiosperms with flowering plants too. This is arbuscular mycorrhizae, and the importance of their ability to increase nutrient acceptance by plant roots is really important. If you're looking at this picture is fluorescence tagged fungal hyphae, and what we've got on the surface there is glomalin, which is the glues that fungal hyphae glue soil particles together with. And 30% of the carbon in a fungal rich soil is actually in the form of glomalin. Soil should, healthy soil should look like black cottage cheese. On the right is a scanning electron micrograph of a soil PED, and you can see the fungal hyphae holding that PED together. And of course, if you till, then you're breaking up those fungal networks. So yeah, black cottage cheese is what you're looking for there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. Oh yeah, look at that. So this is an image under the microscope of compost, and in the middle, the line there is fungal hyphae. And when we're making compost and compost tea, because we're supporting perennials, which prefer fungally dominated soils, we're looking for fungi in our compost and compost tea. And we've got a lot of flagellates swimming around there, which are a good thing for us to have in our composts. This is, I live on a citrus ranch. This is outside where we've done some work. It's organic, and I was, you can see the mulch there, and we've got significant mushrooms happening. If you look closer in the soil, and I know that Ben had some good photographs of this, you can see the mycelium in degrading those wood chips. And that's ideal. I really like to see that. And if you compare it to this orchard, this is what some people might call a conventional or industrial orchard. You can see how there's a loss of accumulated soil organic matter under the trees. There's a loss of biodiversity. It's a monocrop, and there's a loss of biomass. When you compare it to what it was at the side of, on the right-hand side of the screen, what you see there is what was there before, which is oak woodland. And in many ways, when I've got new homeowners coming to Ojai and they have just a couple of acres of citrus and they don't know what to do with it, they don't want to spray it, but then they can't sell their crops. One of the things I really do get them to think about is to do conservation easements, is to move back towards oak woodland. This is something that, though, in terms of edge development, I thought was really important. And this, although it's over avocados, and I haven't seen this being done on citrus, this is a nitrogen fixing tree growing above avocados in Ojai. This is Tipuana tipu. And here you've got a canopy tree that is stabilizing the temperature under its canopy. And these avocados survived much better the heat wave that crisped a lot of the avocados in just naked orchards, if you like. But above every acre of land on Earth, there's 35,000 tons of nitrogen. And if you have nitrogen fixing plants, then you can freely put that into the soil. And that's using an on-site resource, you know. And so I think that we need to be looking and thinking about using support species in different ways. And I don't know if work has been done on this, Ben, you may know, but I think that looking at this development of edges is one way to go. And so nitrogen fixing over story trees would be one that I would recommend trying. Also for introducing animals, ducks just seem to be ideal. I know people have tried pigs, which are kind of destructive. People have tried sheep, which, you know, the Apricot Lane folks have got sheep going out there, but they've also got ducks. And the thing about ducks is that they don't scratch the soil. They kind of crimp any grasses or plants that they don't eat. And they provide great control, especially of snails. And the manures that they produce are pretty soluble and disappear pretty quickly with a couple of rounds of irrigation. And then what you've got is a nutrient dense crop because you've got eggs and meat. And so I think it's important to think about, you know, other species, support species, both plant and animals, that we can introduce to increase the health of our citrus. And when you think about citrus, you know, too, it's acidic sugar water, and really it might be better if we became duck farmers. I do promote the use of compost tea, which is liquid carbon. And we use this, here, I'll let that go. We use that as a soil drench. And what you're doing there is introducing, as as Ben alluded to, you know, just a ton of varied biology. The quality of your compost tea totally depends on the quality of your compost. So that's the most important thing, is to be making high quality compost, but you can just spread the biological love a lot more efficiently with compost tea. And that, as I say, you can use that as a soil drench, but you can also use it as a foliar applicant, and obviously that some of that gets down into the soil by dripping off the trees. This is me doing actively aerated compost tea that's fungally dominated and spraying that onto the surface of leaves. And I think that you know, in that compost tea, there are some fungal foods. We put in kelp and whole fish. We do use humate, and you can generate your own humate by pouring liquid gently through high quality compost. And this is the same tree next season. So I just took this photograph a couple of days ago. So that's what I went through very rapidly in order to get you guys caught up in timing. So I hope that helped spark a few ideas.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much, David. Brett, do you see any questions?
I do not.
So give people a few more minutes to ask David your burning questions.
Yeah. I don't know if David can answer this. There was a question from last one regarding gray water in orchards. Are there any studies on that anyone's familiar
Great
with?
question.
I don't know about studies on it. I mean, I know that it's certainly using gray water as a water resource, if it's possible, makes sense. You know, there are definitely people who are working on gray water systems, may not be for, you know, commercial ag though.
Mm-hmm. We had a project up north, and we were going to build some farm worker housing, and we had to design a wastewater system for that, for about 8 houses, and we got it all engineered. We never ended up doing this project, but we were going to make what's called a chambered leach field, which is, rather than your regular gravel field trenches, they were have chambers that don't allow roots to penetrate. And so anyway, those are put in trenches and then covered with soil, and it's just like a regular wastewater system or septic system, but this would actually be black water. But we actually got it approved by CCOF, and we got it approved by the county of Contra Costa, and we never ended up building it, but we were going to plant pear trees over this. Mm-hmm. But as far as studies, there are some books from the state of California on gray water use, and I think those have some references in them, but I don't know how much in agriculture, how much is just in domestic houses.
I see there's a question about what's the long-term vision for citrus in the Ojai Valley. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we faced here is, just because of the attraction of buying land here and moving here or living here or having a second or third home here, is that there's more and more people are buying smaller chunks of citrus. They're getting a couple of acres and then they wonder what to do with it. So I ran into somebody who has 4 acres. It came with 2.5 acres of Valencias, which are being managed by Progressive. They look great, but they can't sell it because they can't have it packed because they haven't done the pesticide application. They don't have the certificate of pesticide application. And so, you know, I'm advising people to diversify away from citrus and to introduce, you know, it's not just cover crops and canopy nitrogen fixing trees, but other species that can go along with those, that might be, you know, introducing other types of fruit trees that are more drought tolerant, or understory support. You know, native ceanothus is a nitrogen fixer. You can experiment with growing artichokes in between trees. Coffee is an understory that they're doing successfully in Goleta, I know. So there are alternatives. I mean, it seems like hemp's a hot one. So can we interplant hemp and citrus? I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
A couple other questions have come up. David, what do you do with the compost after you make the tea out of it?
Oh, I put the spent compost tea bag back into my compost pile. And because I'm making fungally dominated compost, or that's the goal, the compost has a lot of woody material in it, and then it's been saturated and it's been soaked in foods. I prefer the term food than fertilizer, because fertilizers can be chemically based, whereas foods I think of as more biological. And so, yeah, I just recycle that stuff, and I have separate piles for worm compost, which is more bacterially dominated in theory, and then piles which are slower for fungal. But what I find is, because I'm incorporating my spent compost tea bags into my worm compost, that my worm compost has a lot of fungal hyphae in it.
Mm-hmm. And then we have one here about adding charcoal from burnt wood crushed into the soil or mulch.
Yeah. So I'm glad they used the term charcoal, because the question I'd have with that overall is, what's the carbon footprint? You know, in terms of regenerative ag, we're trying to work with, okay, is this increasing carbon content? And if I'm burning wood, it seems counterintuitive to me to be burning wood to increase soil carbon content. So I wonder about the overall carbon footprint about it. And I do know that, yes, charcoal creates spaces for microbiology to inhabit. You know, interestingly, after the Thomas fire, it seems like that, you know, where there was a general natural application of charcoal to the hillsides, there certainly was a flush of growth after that. And so maybe there's some evidence there that charcoal has a beneficial effect on plants. But again, I would ask about that overall carbon footprint of making charcoal.
Mm-hmm. And then we have another question here regarding the volume and quality of fruit that's picked off trees farmed in the manner that you were discussing as compared to more conventionally farmed citrus.
Yeah, you know, and I get that comes down to, you know, doing really tightly controlled experiments, which are really onerous and hard to do. I talked to somebody at UC Riverside who's doing an experiment on compost tea, and it's beyond what we can do as a small nonprofit to run experiments like that. You know, in terms of sweetness of the fruit, I mean, we're brixing fruit that is coming in at 15 on our pixies, which is fine. And anecdotally, I know the pixie tangerines, when they get too much nitrogen, they green, and the fruit stays green and it's not as sweet. So that's kind of interesting.
Can you explain bricks, David?
It's the sugar content of the fruit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not sure about, you know, research on that, but we're making fruit that's sweet.
Mm-hmm. So 2 more questions have come in regarding when you're brewing actively aerated compost tea, do you check the samples under the microscope to determine when it's optimal?
Oh, like when in the brew it's optimal?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Oh, okay. You know, generally we brew for 16, 18, up to 24 hours. And more interestingly for me is to look at how long the brew or after the brew has been made, and then you put it into a container, what happens over time if it's just left in the container. And that interests me because folks ask me, you know, well, how long can we keep it? And, you know, we advise that it's used day of. But, you know, it seems like if it's kept in cool enough conditions, that compost tea can be okay for a day or two in a bucket. But once you get to about 3 days, then it starts to go anaerobic, your bacterial population grows up and it smells. And, you know, we have, so our ability to detect pathogens is with our noses, you know, and when it begins to smell yucky, then, you know, we know we want to move away from it. So I do look at them though through the microscope, and we're pretty much the thing we're looking for is the presence or absence of fungal hyphae, but also maybe if we saw ciliates in there, for instance, that would indicate that it had gone anaerobic, but you can usually tell by the smell of it.
Mm-hmm. And then the last question we got here is, any good compost tea recipes and systems for making the teas that you would?
All right. So, you know, we actually have a YouTube channel that shows some information about what we use, and it shows the foods that we use, and whole fish, kelp, and humate are the things we rely on. And then we use also this landscape mix we get from Island Seed and Feed. Shout out to those guys. And it's a mix of fish feathers, kelp, soy, and alfalfa. And we do incorporate some of those into the compost too. But yeah, we've got, in terms of the brewers, we go all the way from 5-gallon brewers, the mini microbulator, up to the biggest brewer we have is the GeoTea, which was in the last picture that Ben showed. And the GeoTea is like a $4,000 unit that is on a tote, one of those IBC totes, and has a very strong pump and a nice extraction system. The downside for me is with that is that it produces, like, the minimum you can brew with it is 175 gallons. That's a lot of compost tea if you're trying to do something small scale. So when with my business, I do sell to landscapers, and our standard amount that we sell is 30 gallons, 6 5-gallon buckets. And that, I have brewers. I've got one going right just I've got a brew going that's got it's a cone tank, and it's a 70-gallon cone tank. So I have different size cone tanks. But you go, I think that Greg showed a picture of the brewers that they have at Apricot Lanes, and those are 2 500-gallon brewers.
Right.
And those, they pump into their irrigation system, and they've had some, you know, issues with pressure of pumps and putting it through filters and blocking emitters and stuff like this. And they're actually moving more towards using foliar application.
We better wrap it up. It was all
right.
all great. I think we got enough to start stimulating our soil food web.
All right.
So,
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Rob.
thank you again, David. So I'm really excited for Jim Davis to be